towards Thomas was a large brown crab with its claws waving in the air. He didn't quite know how to react. If he stood up quickly, would it jump towards him? If he stayed still, would it nip him? Or if he ran away, would it chase him? He had no idea how fast crabs could run, nor even if they could jump. He sat motionless as the crab stopped for a moment. It was as though he too was frightened and not sure what Thomas's reaction would be towards him. It was stalemate. As Thomas stared at the crab, a large hand clasped the back of the shell, lifted the crab off the wall. "Grandpa!" exclaimed Thomas, now feeling safe and secure. His grandfather laughed as he saw his grandson's reaction. "It won't hurt you. Well, not much. It might give you a nip on the bum if you stayed there," he said. "He's the one that nearly got away, young'un." "Did he climb out of the sea?" asked Thomas. "No," said his grandfather, "out of the fish van. The fishmonger in the square had a delivery of fish a few hours ago. The van doors were left open, and when the delivery man went in the shop, well, crabs are normally in a tank of water and kept alive, but I reckon this one decided he wanted to go back home. The fishmonger knew he was one missing. He must have been wandering around because nobody could find him. Can we let him go back to the sea? After all, he got this far, didn't he?" "What about the fishmonger?" asked his grandfather. "He won't have one to sell. He won't get any money. I'll give him some of my pocket money for him." With that, his grandfather burst out with laughter and replied, "I'll sort it out, pay for it, and we'll take it back to the sea." Thomas's face lit up. "But on one condition," added his grandpa. "You has to carry it by the shell down to the beach." Nervously, Thomas agreed, and his grandfather showed him how to hold the crab without getting nipped. As the weeks passed by, Thomas became more familiar with the surroundings and even recognised some of the local people. One day he would spend his time with his grandfather, and on others he would help at the craft market. He even made friends with the fishmonger and worked in the shop one day. This was very exciting, as he learnt the names of all the fish. He saw them exactly as they were when they came out of the sea. His previous experience of fish was mostly wrapped in batter and served with chips. At the end of his day working in the fish shop, he was given some prawns for his tea. He took them home and asked his gran if she cooked them for all of them. He couldn't wait to tell his mother and father about the day at the fishmonger's when they rang to see how he was. They called several times since the start of his stay, but he would always tell his gran he was too busy to talk with them. But somehow today was different. It was the day he saw his first fish without a batter coating. Saturday, he rose early to the familiar sound of the seagulls squawking as they were fighting over a fish. He looked out of his bedroom window, and there opposite was a fishing fleet. They had sailed in on the high tide overnight, and were now moored up and unloading their catch. Every now and again a fish would be tossed into the water, and the seagulls would frantically dive to scoop up the bounty. Thomas looked through his telescope. Though there was still a slight mist hanging over the harbour, he could clearly see his grandfather on the quayside helping unload some of the crates. He rushed downstairs after having washed and dressed. "Good morning, Tom. What's the rush?" "Gran, can I go and help Grandpa with the fish?" "Don't you want any breakfast first?" "If I do, they'll be finished before I get there," he said, out of breath and rushing around. "Okay, I suppose so, but be very careful. Listen to your grandfather. Make sure you don't get in the way. The catch is worth a lot of money." With that, Thomas ran out of the house and off down the twisty streets. Some of the locals shouted good morning to him as he ran past them. They were smiling because it wasn't hard to guess where he was going. He arrived at the quayside panting. "Grandpa, can I help?" "Hi, young'un, you're up early. Can I help, please?" repeated Thomas, still trying to catch his breath. "Who's this then?" "Your grandson," said one of the fishermen in a strong Cornish accent. "Yeah, he's staying with me for the summer holidays. He wants to help." "Good. All hands are helpful. Here, catch this," said the fisherman, and with that he threw a large fish towards Thomas. He caught it, but the wet towel hit him on the chin. He coughed and spluttered as all the fishermen laughed. Even his grandfather had to chuckle. Thomas threw the fish into a tray on the quayside and shouted, "Next!" This caused even more laughter from the fishermen. "He's a real fisherman, ain't he?" said the captain, looking at Thomas's grandfather. That he is, he replied, smiling. Gradually the haul was unloaded, and so did the team of men, along with Thomas and his grandfather, moved along the fleet of vessels, helping to unload their catch. A convoy of small vans were loaded and headed off towards the fish market for the auction. Some trays had blue tags on them. These had already been allocated to local shops and private families, many of whom were connected to the returning fishermen. The local fishmonger, who was the owner of the escapee crab, came to collect his tray and pay the captain for one of the boats. He saw Thomas. "Hello, Tom. You here to help unload?" "Well, you started putting the fish back, then you came and sold it with me, now you're unloading the catch, next you'll be on the fishing boat fishing for it. And you'll have done all the whole process, even if it were in the reverse order," he said in a joking manner. This caused another outburst of laughter from the fisherman. "Oh, I hope so," said Thomas eagerly, looking at his grandfather. "I think we'd better get you home now and get some breakfast, young un," said his grandfather in an uneasy voice. The two said their goodbyes to all the crews and left for home. Arriving back at the cottage, they opened the door and went into the living room, and on the table was a note. It simply read, "I've gone to the mission, couldn't wait any longer, eggs and bacon in the fridge, love Gran." "Well, I think we're making our own breakfast, young un. Can you make the tea and I'll cook the eggs and bacon?" "OK, I'll lay the table as well," said Thomas. Then the two of them set about preparing their meal. After breakfast, Thomas helped his grandfather clear up, then set off to help his gran at the craft market. His grandfather waited until Thomas was clear of the cottage, and went off in the opposite direction on a mission of his own. "Hi, Tom," said several of the stallholders as he walked into the dim-lit hall. It was quite busy, and his gran was serving a young couple who wanted some traditional fisherman-style jumpers. "Hi, Gran," said Thomas. The male customer looked at him and said in a jovial manner, "You'll never get much business if you don't turn up until now." "He's been helping unload the catch from the fleet earlier this morning," said his grandma, jumping to his defence. "Oh, sorry, I didn't realise I was talking to a real fisherman," he said, smiling. "That's okay," replied Thomas, beaming with delight that he'd been called a real fisherman. The sale was made, the young couple left, and his grandma asked about his morning's work unloading the catch. "It was good, but it's hard work and smelly, ain't it?" "You get used to it," she said, smiling. "You certainly smell like a real fisherman today," called the man from the plant stall. Several of the stallholders giggled. "Don't worry, Tom, you can have a good bath tonight," interjected his grandma. In the afternoon, Thomas worked with the owner of the plant stall and learnt the name of some of the flowers and where they grew best. A customer arrived and asked about a problem he had trying to find plants for a shady position. Thomas, having only had the conversation about plants for such an area, stepped forward and started his sales technique, telling more about the best plants. The customer was so impressed he bought all the plants in the stall for a shady area, much to the delight of the stallholder. Thomas was given some of the profit as a reward. At the end of what seemed a long day, since he'd been up early, he wandered home with his gran for dinner, weary and tired. Sitting at the table with a teapot and 3 cups and saucers was his grandfather. "Come and sit yourselves down, you must be tired." "What have you been doing all day?" asked Thomas's grandma. "You usually pop into the store in the afternoons." "I've been busy. I went to see Sharky." This had no meaning to Thomas, but he thought he must be an old fisherman friend. "Doesn't he still make—" started his grandmother, but her question was cut short by her husband. "Yes, he does." "Oh," she replied, surprised at his reaction. "I think you'd better go and have a quick bath before dinner, young un," said his grandpa. His grandma looked puzzled. She hadn't even started it yet. He gave her a wink as Thomas did as he was told and headed for his room in the bathroom. "What have you been up to? I don't trust you," said Thomas's grandma to her husband. "Wait and see," he replied, grinning. There was a sudden yell of delight from upstairs. His grandparents went up to Thomas's room, where he stood, beaming and swinging around a rich golden brown cane fishing rod. "So that's why you went to see Sharky," exclaimed Thomas's grandmother. "Yes. After the comment on the quayside, when we were unloading the fish, I realised the young one had never been fishing before, let alone gone out on a fishing vessel. Sharky owed me a favour from many years ago. I said one day I would need that favour. Today was that day." Thomas ran to his grandfather and wrapped his arms around his neck and said, "Thanks, Grandpa, it's smashing. I've never been fishing before and never had a rod neither." "You mean either, dear," corrected his grandma. "Yes, either, neither. I ain't had one," he burst out with excitement. They all stood laughing as they looked at the shiny new rod. "You can't go fishing without a reel," said his grandma. "Oh, I nearly forgot," said his grandfather. With that he disappeared downstairs and pulled something from his overcoat pocket and returned to the room. "Here you are," he said, handing Thomas a black fishing reel fully laden with line. It was Sharky's, but he said he had too many. It was time for a new owner for this one. Thanks again, said Thomas, almost out of breath with excitement. Don't thank me. I think you need to thank Sharky. I'll take you fishing tomorrow, then we can see Sharky afterwards and you can tell him how you got on. He'll be pleased to hear your fisherman's tale. If it's anything like yours, the fish will grow a foot every time you tell it, muttered his grandma, giggling. The next morning started with the usual seagull chorus and the sun trying to get through the early morning mist that hung over the harbour like a soft white blanket. Thomas looked out of his window and saw some small fishing boats heading out to the daily fishing grounds. Not like the big deep-sea fishing vessels that went away for a week at a time, but were adapted to take hollymaker fishermen on sea fishing days out. Most of them were displaying a range of rods fixed to the back of the boats, rising in the air like thin columns. Today was going to be his first day to fish, and he was going to catch a big one and show everybody how good he was. His grandfather was a fisherman once, so surely he had some of his skills. After all, he was related. Breakfast was a constant flow of questions from Thomas. Where were they going? How long would they be there? Would it take long to get there? Can they take their dinner? What fish would they catch? His grandpa tried hard to keep up with the answers until his gran said if Thomas didn't stop talking and eat all his breakfast, he wouldn't have enough energy to pull a fish out. After all the breakfast dishes were washed up and cleared away, Thomas went to his room and came downstairs, rod in hand. You'll have to go out to the shed, young'un, and get the bucket and spade, said his grandpa. I thought we were going fishing. I didn't want to play on the beach, said Thomas, looking disappointed. Don't be a tease, said his grandma to her husband. Thomas smiled and said, Yeah, don't tease me. Let's go fishing now. We are, said his grandfather. Now go and get the bucket and spade. But I don't understand, replied Thomas. His gran was preparing to make some cakes while they were away fishing all day, and as she reached for the flour, she said, Tom, what are you going to use for bait? We'll get some maggots from the fishing shop, won't we, grandfather? Maggots are no good for fishing in the sea. We have to go down to the beach with the spade and collect some lugworms. Ugh. You mean we have to dig them up first? Can't we just get some from the shop? We can, but these will be fresh and better for the fish. Come on, let's get up under your gran's feet and go fishing. They both kissed his grandma goodbye at the same time, one on each cheek, and set off to the beach via the shed. Thomas and his grandpa were busy digging for lugworms when his grandfather saw something bobbing in the sea and went to investigate. Meanwhile, Thomas walked across the soft sand looking for signs of his bait. His grandfather disappeared from sight when suddenly Thomas found himself sinking slowly in the sand. The more he struggled to get out, the deeper he sank. Grandfather, help, he called, but he was still nowhere to be seen. By now he was already up to his waist, yelling for his grandfather, and was still sinking.